So, addictive processes. We this year have been looking at Martha Sweezy's internal family systems therapy for shame and guilt, her shame cycle. And do go and have a look on my website in the news section. Each month we've done little bits, or we've concentrated on one bit of the shame cycle and other things too. And the shame cycle is, there we go, something when you were small, something happened. You know, our society generally tries to get children to behave through shaming and judging and controlling. You know, maybe as some parents are doing things differently now, but injury, a bad thing's happened. Someone is saying you're bad, you're stupid, you've got it wrong, you're too much, you're too little, you're too shy, you're too this, you're too that. From their worry and mutiny, which we'll come on to. And the child somehow takes it on and accepts it. I am bad. They've got it right because they're big and grown up, and it's too dangerous for me to say, no, that's not right. It's a burden gets taken on and an identity gets taken on. And so Martha suggests that there are 4 main groups, and there's obviously going to be a lot more parts, and shame isn't at the basis of everything, but there's 4 main acts in her shame cycle, and the first 2 are, or the Act 3 and Act 4 are internal critics go large. So the protector of the little child within comes in to criticise and actually takes on the voice of the person that's criticised you and shamed you, so that you get there first before they do, and then it's trying to improve you. Act 4, the prevention never again team, you're looking outwards and inwards, so that you're perfect and that you never again am I going to feel shame, never again am I going to, get criticised or judged or by someone external. So these are the managing parts, and we'll come to those in a minute. And the Act 5 and Act 6 are what we call in IFS the firefighting reactive parts. When the vulnerable feelings come up, because they do every day, what some of us might do is we might criticise and judge and blame someone else, would deflect the shame and put it onto someone else. It's not me that's bad, it's actually you. I don't want to feel this shame, so I'm going to be reactive and come to you. And the final one of Martha's shame cycle is the rescue team, feel better. Take myself out, and drugs and sex and all those lovely soothing things that make me feel better, that stop me feeling vulnerable. So if you want to learn more about the shame cycle, go. Ordinary Sacred also goes through it. Christine Dixon, she's great on YouTube, or you can obviously read the book. But what I'm going to be doing mainly today is taking it from this amazing book, which is I can't read it backwards. Internal Family Systems Therapy for Addictions, Martha Sweezy and Cece Sykes, and Dick Schwartz, who was the founder of IFS. And it's a really good book, especially if you're a therapist. And I'm hopefully going to condense it into a small video. Cece Sykes, that's CECE SYKES, also does lots of she's involved in IFS talks, YouTube talks. She's got a great website, and she's got a great cackle, and it's really engaging, so really worth listening to her, because in 20 minutes or whatever this is such a huge topic. So she talks about you treat a system, not a cycle. not a symptom. So what we just did in the meditation was we got to know the soother, the one that pushes back, and the vulnerable, tender ones that get ignored. So if in the meditation, when I asked you to ask your soother what would happen if they couldn't do their job anymore, I don't know how that was for some of these parts, but they are the unsung heroes in the system. They are trying desperately to look after you. There might be one that's even stronger behind. There might be a suicidal part behind, or there might, if you take away the drink, people are going to start having, affairs, or they're going to start smoking more, or coffee, become totally addicted to coffee, or I don't know, but there's, it's a system, not just a symptom. And IFS is all about trying to, this way of doing it is looking at the system. So, just to confuse matters, we've looked at a cycle, and now we're looking at a triangle. And how she does it, so if I'm trying to bring the triangle into the cycle and the cycle back into the triangle, Act 2 is those little vulnerable ones, the tender ones that have taken on burdens, the ones inside us, inner children that feel, vulnerable and lost and unseen, deficient, inadequate, abandoned for any number of reasons, both historical and present day. It's not all about the past, it's in the present day too. And they activate due to external interactions or challenges in your life. So then, managers, Act 3 and 4, ignore or try and contain these vulnerable parts by getting busy, concentrating on tasks or the needs of others, keeping you in your head, lots of intellectual analysing parts over here, or using criticism to goad the exile into improving and becoming acceptable, your inner critic having a right go. Noting the exile's distress and shamefulness, the firefighters, so that's Act 5 and 6, the firefighters take over. They're either going to go and blame other people, or they're going to use substances and various practices, whatever it takes, to mask or medicate emotional pain. Exiles, the vulnerable ones, the tender ones, then feel degraded, sick, fearful, isolated, really lonely, at which point the managers mobilise again, and they frantically mobilise to get operations back on track, in the hope of regaining control and self-respect, and/or attitude. The attitude managers come and criticise and moralise, attack, vilify and shame the comfort ones, the ones that are trying to soothe you and make you feel better. So, the firefighters return to the system again, anything to further medicate the pain, block the shame and deny the consequences, which leads to the exiles feeling worse. So what happens? You then get the managers coming in again. Can you see how it's a cycle? It's a cycle and it's a triangle. You can look at it from either way. So from this book, addictive processes affect people's body, mind and spirit. When people engage in compulsive, repetitive use of substances or practices like gambling, porn, high-risk sex, over and under eating, it affects their physical health, reconditions their brain and generates despair. Intimate relationships suffer, families break up and communities fragment. So, we're not, some of my hula hoop thing mid-afternoon is not causing my family to fragment at the moment. It's like there's a sort of hierarchy, and Cece talks about her triangle being, my critics are not having a huge go about my mid-afternoon hula hoop packet. My exiles aren't being too activated. But if I'm having a difficult time, if, the external situation, politics, I'm neurodivergent, my overwhelm is increasing, I will increasingly go, not only to have a hula hoop, I might then go to the fridge and eat, whatever. I might have a glass or 2 or 6 of wine, and then my critics are going to really come in and my triangle is going to get bigger. So we're treating the triangle to invite it to get smaller again, which I think it's really easy for me I can see some nodding. So what if we could do things differently? And Cece talks about its healing in relationship. So I just wanted to put quickly in the psychological definitions of addictive process. So this is going to be on the website. Chronic polarity between, so this is Cece's and Martha and Dick's, a chronic polarity between 2 sets of extreme parts, critical and controlling managers and avoiding soothing firefighters, distractors, both trying to protect the exposure of buried emotional pain, the vulnerable, tender little ones. Gabor Mate talks about addictive process being pain medication, coping with complex trauma. D. Sumrock, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, addiction shouldn't be called addiction, it should be called ritualized compulsive comfort seeking. I can really start hearing the compassion in this, and I can hear some whoos as well. And then Anne Wilson-Scheif, again, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, anything we lie about. There's a phrase in the rooms, the 12-step rooms, is you're as sick as your secrets. Anything we lie about. I certainly lie, something about, I've just gone shopping and bought a nice dress, and it's like, how much did that cost? It's a charity shop. Yeah. So I invite you to consider, Cece is inviting you to consider the word addict. What comes up for you around that word? What parts come up? Notice when you think about the word addict. And Cece writes, schools, churches, families, parts of us, criminal behaviour, we tend to go to something really judgy. And, the mainstream treatment models for addiction are heavily skewed to confronting the addict and challenging their denial. And so Cece is saying, let's do something different. And she's, they're working in treatment centres now in the States, which is really exciting. The relationally engaging your inner system and healing the attachment disruptions and other traumas that activate addictive behaviours in the first place. So, but surely this will enable them, say the sterner voices. We need to keep the addict contained. And Cece isn't saying that 12-step groups aren't fantastic. Many are. She also says that, there are 12-step IFS 12 steps and psychotherapy. It's no longer so black and white. But she wants to talk about the emotional stigma towards folk that have more extreme addictive processes. And so it's not about treating the behaviours, it's treating what happened in the past. So she reminds us that most people with bigger triangles, more extreme processes, will have high ACE scores, which is a set of questions where you can measure your, the score of your trauma. She invites you to imagine a small child, and in a lounge, in a sitting room, and the parents are fighting, and then one of the parents kicks the telly, which smashes. Okay, so one scenario is the parents realise what they're doing, and they, calm their nervous systems, and they're with the child, and they explain what happened, and they explain that they were overwhelmed, and that, this firefighter came in. You don't have to say that exact to the child, but you're with the child, you explain it. The next day, the child can go to school and be okay. It's, maybe a bit wobbled, but nervous system coming back online, feeling okay. Another option is, the child, it just sort of escalates, and then the child then goes and is on their own. What do they go and do in their bedroom? What are they going down the hall to breakfast the next morning? How is that going to be feeling when everyone's ignoring it, no one's talking about it? How do you then go into school and interact with your mates? Do you have any mates? Because it's like, your nervous system is just going to be sort of running havoc. So what do? You get one of these, or two of these, or six of these lovely firefighters to come in to soothe you, and you get all hosts of fabulous managers that are going to try and get you to manage at school or at home and be perfect, or diet or control or caretake or whatever. I mean, to me this makes so much sense. And so she invites you to think of addictive processes as a chronic polarity. Start to think of the big picture, big learns, all the parts that put you first to help you escape, and the ones that comply and help you obey the rules. Healing is the relationship. So what are we going to do now? What am I supposed to do with all this? The invitation is very much to remind you that there's a you here, there's a core you that isn't a part, that's the timeless, but also the age you are. And to meet with these parts, invite them round a cosy table, invite them to notice you, self to part, part to self, and find out about them, like we did in that meditation, and bring the little exiles and have them across the table, and let them be soothed by your presence. And of course you're going to blend a lot, but over time, hopefully things sort of, the triangle becomes a little bit smaller. Let's look at our patterns. What if there's another way? So I know I want to bring in a tiny little bit of that, I will in a minute, but she talks about healing is in the relationship. Up there. So she talks about the blamers, the flamers, and the shamers, which I think is really rather wonderful, and with self in the middle. So paradigm shift, we're in this together. It's not me and looking at you down there, sort of addict. It's and we're in this together. And as a therapist, I wouldn't be saying, because who's bringing their addiction or their addictive process to therapy? It's going to be a manager that wants to stop it, isn't it? It's not going to be, it's going to be a manager that first comes to therapy, and it's like, who are you siding with if you say, yeah, I'm going to get you to stop drinking? You're creating a contract or vision. What do you want for yourself out of coming here? I'm not in charge of your sobriety plan. It seems that most parts of you want this to be different. I am here to support you in sustaining those changes. And you're inviting parts you're meeting parts that are, who's nervous, not ready, or not committed, not on board to giving up. Do we want the manager in charge? So, love this, and I've brought this into next year's diary dates. We have 8 C's. Dick Schwartz talks about 8 C's. Cece brings in the 9th one, which is choice. And so I just wanted to sort of really bring in that it's allowing choice into the system. And Cece reminds us, if we relapse, we never go back to square one. It's like square 30. The goal is to get into relationship, not into control. Change occurs in a welcoming, regulated system without judgment. Okay, so I meant to put this in earlier, but I didn't. As always, tiny little zoom off down one path, which is for neurodivergent folk. There's a very large number of neurodifferent folk in addictives, in the rooms and 12 steps, generally going towards addictive processes. And I always spring this on you. Well, I recently, this lovely thing that Candice Christensen and Meg Martinez Detamanti have done. And, of course, if you have sensory overwhelm, if you have rejection sensitivity, if you are hyper-focused, you can hyper-focus on your addiction. Common software protectors are addictive processes. So I just wanted to pop that in there. There's not a huge amount written, but and I'll put more on the website because I don't want to go on too much about it. But of course, and I didn't realise that my mum, I am sort of diagnosing my mum after her death, but my mum was, she died of alcoholic ketoacidosis, which is, she basically drank herself to death. And I see now she was neurodivergent. Really clearly she had neurodifferences, and she felt so rejected, and she was so overwhelmed by everything. And we were all so mean to her. I'm really going to own it. And so what does she do? She goes for the diazepam, she goes for the drink. It's so hard for her to take back her hyper-focus on, the relationships and everything else, because she's neurodivergent. So, I spend a lot of time trying to forgive myself and for how I treated someone who, actually deserved more compassion than certainly I was able to give her. So, coming back, I will put more in here, and the list is fantastic in here, but I'm just finishing up here. Common behaviours of manager parts in addictive systems. So look at the website because there'll be more. But blamers, shamers, perfectionists, logical rationalists, intellectuals, fixers, strivers, rescuers, overgivers, know-it-alls, and controllers. And common manager characteristics in addictive systems. They're responsible, compulsive workers who get tasks completed and value being productive and good, caring about appearances, chronically anxious and vigilant. They work overtime to prevent exiles and firefighters from taking over by engaging in their hostile, shaming behaviour. They tend to operate, managers, from the neck up and minimise and dismiss feelings. And the fears of the managers tend to be, they're frightened of the chaos and unpredictability of the firefighters. The fear that feelings of shame and worthlessness will flood the internal system after firefighter activity. Is this making sense? Yeah. Fear that self isn't strong enough to help firefighters, often doubting that the self even exists. Fear that secrets, old memories, painful emotional wounds will be exposed and re-injured. And fear that nothing will change. Oh, I'm seeing some nodding. Okay, so that's the managers. Common behaviour of firefighter parts in addictive systems. Alcohol, drugs, disordered eating, sexual preoccupation, fantasizing, risk-taking, self-harm, suicidal ideation, gambling, overspending. Of course, in here is also rage, violence, exploitation and abuse of others, dissociating, fantasizing about idealized images of success, power, or perfect relationships. And so the characteristics of firefighters: chaotic, out of control, driven to keep using, I don't care, you can't stop me, I'm going to do it. Very present orientated. They're both impulsive, unthinking and unconcerned about their consequences, and compulsive. They have no sense of choice. They're heroic in the way that they don't back down, even under fire. They will take a bullet for the system. They don't actually care if your relationships disintegrate. They don't care about your body. They don't care even if you die, because they are just so focused on you not feeling the feelings of the exiles. I think that's really important. Then tend to be narcissistic, self-absorbed, concerned primarily with the emotions and unmet needs of the exiles. Resistant to feedback, and will avoid noticing or listening to the impact of their behaviour on others. And they'll also deny, hide evidence and minimise about how much the client's using. And they're committed and will stay on job until they're convinced that the exiles are safe enough. Fears, common firefighter fears. Sorry, I know this is a bit boring and a bit of a list, but hopefully some goes in. Fear that hopelessness and despair of exiles will flood the system and cause collapse. And fear that hopelessness and despair will also create collapse, or that a suicidal part will be evoked. Fear that managers will accommodate other people too much. That sort of thing. So I think that's us done. So thank you for listening.